he doesn't stop. It's really impressive.
He makes you look like the Blob.
Yeah. So what does that make you?
The triple Blob.
Oh boy. Can we talk about this Evander Kane LTIR situation?
Yes,
the league
sure.
seems to be circling back to. So
Yes.
What's going on here? So Kane, just to bring everyone up to speed, for those that don't remember, like last September, he had a pretty significant surgery to tackle like a number of things, right?
Yes.
And then he had
all
another
around
one.
the groin, hip area.
Yes. And they had another one in January, a knee surgery, and you're saying that's the one that the league is starting to look, or continuing to look harder at.
So this is the story there. So he had a knee surgery, as you said, in January, and it forced him to stop his rehab from the other surgery for a few weeks. And that is the one the league has put the spotlight on. Because basically their opinion is, did he really need this surgery? And if he didn't really need this surgery, could he have been back sooner? Now, the Oilers, I think, believe that this was not a thing anymore. But from what I've heard, the league had indicated to them at the start of the playoffs, or at least indicated at the start of the playoffs, we're not going to pursue this anymore because you guys are playing, but we reserve the right to bring it back up again after you're done. So now this is where we are. I'll be honest, I don't really like it. They're about to change this, I believe, in the new CBA, Kyle. Like, what I expect them to do is say that in the playoffs, your roster can be whatever, but your in-game lineup has to be under the cap. That's what I'm expecting. I can't say 100%, but that's what I'm expecting. But I just think that so many people have abused this over the years. Why should the Oilers get a penalty when so many other teams haven't? You know, I will say that it's not my opinion that matters on this one. And I do think the league grinded teams this year. Like Kane, even when he came back, he had to miss a playoff game first. And if you look, like Tyler Seguin, he came back one game before the playoffs, right? And I had a few people circling that and saying that one kind of had the league saying, well, if he can't play in the regular season, how do you expect him to play game one? Kind of like what happened with Kane missing that first game. So they did grind teams a lot harder this year. I don't know. It's been abused so much over the years. I don't think it's right that Edmonton should pay a penalty here potentially, but obviously the league's vote matters a lot more than mine. And they have been all over that particular procedure.
Yeah, and anyway, I know we're not going to get to the bottom of this, but the whole, well, we reserved the right to look into this afterwards. So what happened? I mean, what if he ripped off 5 goals he had a great first 3 rounds, and he rips off 5 goals in the final, Edmonton wins the cup, and then they decide to come back around and punish the Oilers for all of this? Like, how would the Florida Panthers feel about that? I know it's all a moot point because that's not what happened, but the whole revisionist nature of this, how it seems to be, doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But what you're saying there about this new provision that's going to be in the CBA, you anticipate in terms of LTIR, because remember we had the question in the thought line not too long ago about teams that in the cup final that have been over the salary cap, and basically all of the last 5 or 6 have been over.
Yeah.
And so if you've got to be under for the 20 guys that you dress, boy, that could drastically shift some teams' thinking when you get to the 3rd week of April.
I have to tell you, if this does happen as I expect, I'm a little bit surprised, because one player did tell me that there were a few of them that had talked, like, how do you explain to the guy who you're going to agree to a rule change with and he can't play in the playoffs?
Right.
So I thought that was pretty fascinating, but it does look like something's changing there.
Okay. So, number of things to keep an eye on in Edmonton as we inch closer to the official beginning of the offseason. Meanwhile, in Dallas, Elliotte, a bit of a newsy day there on Thursday. So it started in the morning. Matt Duchene, 4-year extension, $4.5 million AAV, front-loaded. This was what his wish was. He wanted to have some security in his life again with where he's at, the age of his kids, all of that. So the 4-year deal there. And then Thursday night, the trade of Mason Marchment to Seattle for a 3rd and 4th round pick. Marchment was entering the final year of his contract. Dallas right up against it, cap hit wise. So why don't you take us through the Stars' thinking through what they got done here on Thursday, Elliotte?
Well, Duchene was a big one for them. He wanted to stay. I think Duchene was going to have a market out there. I had heard that. I especially heard that Duchene was going to have some offers out there that might not be as long as 4 years, but would have a higher AAV than he got from Dallas. And I think Vancouver was one of those teams. I had heard the Canucks were interested in him and were disappointed he didn't get on the market. But Duchene had made it very clear he didn't want to go, and Dallas made it work. And they front-loaded it, too, with bonuses. I think in terms of actual dollars, like the total contract, I think Duchene got more money overall with Dallas, but I think he would have gotten a higher AAV in a shorter term in some other places in Vancouver. But he was happy, and Kyle, you know the old Bob McCowan saying, don't leap with happy. Good for him. Kyle, the reaction to the Marchment trade was really interesting. There was a lot of that's it from other fan bases out there. I think the Stars fans understand that they're in such a jam with the cap situation that they were going to have to move somebody for no return. And I don't think anyone's surprised Marchment was the guy. But I think a lot of other fan bases are kind of sitting there and saying, we couldn't beat that. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody did. One thing about Jim Nill is he's pretty good at, or very good actually, about, trading a guy like Marchment and saying, I'm going to put you in a good situation. Merrick had a tweet tonight about how he sent him to Seattle because the tax situation was similarly advantageous. The other thing, too, is Marchment is the kind of player Seattle needs. The Kraken are trying to build an identity. Marchment, whether you like him or don't like him, he has a big identity. I think he's going to play there, and he's the kind of personality they need there, on the ice especially. And I think Nill recognizes that. Kyle, we talked about with Marchessault in Nashville. He came from a no-tax state, Vegas. He went to a no-tax state, Nashville, and he has control over the situation. And one of the things I'd heard was that if he got traded from the Predators, he would only agree or basically say, I don't want to go somewhere where my contract could become less valuable. That's part of the equation. And I think that's also what happened a little bit here. I understand why some fans are going to look at this and say, my team couldn't beat that. First of all, he did have some small protection, so certain teams wouldn't be there. And secondly, Nill made a point of making sure he went into a situation. But I would bet there's some other teams here that would also be pretty disappointed they couldn't get Marchment. I heard there was a lot of interest.
So, basically, you bring in 4.5